Jesus was not just surrounded by followers, miracles, and peace. He faced truth that is a lot more darker. The truth be told, his life was filled with opposition from men who were proud, deceitful, and completely lost in their own power. These were not ordinary people that we're looking at. They were the living faces of narcissism, men so ruled by their ego that they could not recognize truth even when it stood right in front of them. The same spirit that hardened Pharaoh's heart in the time of Moses reappeared in new forms during the life of Jesus. It never dies, it only changes faces, I'm telling you. It lives wherever pride replaces conscience and control replaces compassion. Jesus is one of the most respected figures in history, honored in Christianity, Islam, and many other traditions. His message was not just about religion, it was about truth, mercy, and awakening from deception. And that is why his story speaks to everyone who has ever faced a narcissist. People who twist kindness into weakness and goodness into something to exploit. Let's look at five narcissists who tried to abuse Jesus and what their actions reveal about the reprobate mind. A mind so corrupted that it loses its ability to see truth, and a seared conscience, a conscience burned past the point of feeling. I'm Danish, a narcissistic abuse recovery professional. Welcome to my channel. This is how the ancient spirit of narcissism still operates today. Stay until the very end. Let's find out together. Number one, the father of all narcissists, Satan. Before Jesus began his mission, he fasted 40 days and nights in the wilderness. When hunger and fatigue reached their limit, Satan appeared. He did not show up with horns or fire. He came with smooth words and false promises. The same way narcissists come pretending to offer help while planning your destruction. Satan said, "If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread." It sounded simple, but it was psychological warfare in disguise. He was saying, "Prove yourself to me." That is the root of all narcissistic manipulation, isn't it? Forcing someone to perform for validation. Then came his next temptation: jump from the highest point of the temple to prove you are divinely protected. When that failed, he offered kingdoms, wealth, and glory in exchange for submission. It was the classic three-step narcissistic test: validation, self-destruction, and absolute control. When the target refuses to bend, you know what happens with the narcissist? The mask falls. Jesus stayed calm and ground. He said, "Get away from me, Satan. Only God is worthy of worship." There was no anger or no need to argue. He responded from conviction, not ego. Satan here represents the first and purest narcissistic mind, what scripture later calls the reprobate mind, a mind so proud that truth sounds like an insult. People like that do not just sin, they lose the ability to feel that it is wrong. The light goes out inside them and darkness becomes normal. That is where narcissism takes birth, when self worship replaces awareness of God. Which brings us to number two, the religious narcissists who weaponized holiness. The Pharisees were respected scholars and moral authorities, weren't they? They wore long robes, prayed in public, and loved to be called rabbis. On the outside, they appeared holy, but inside, they were filled with envy, malice, and exaggerated self importance. They criticized Jesus for healing on the Sabbath, trying to trap him with questions meant to twist his words, and gossiped in secret, accusing him of blasphemy. They could not handle how effortlessly he connected with ordinary people. Their power depended on fear and control, not love or truth. When Jesus spoke, people felt free, and freedom always threatens those who build their status on control. He confronted them very openly, saying they were like cups polished on the outside but filthy inside. That insult was not personal, it was diagnostic. He was exposing spiritual narcissism, a holiness performed for attention while hiding corruption. The Pharisees lived with what the Bible calls a seared conscience, a moral sense burned away by repetition of hypocrisy. When a person lies long enough, even their own heart starts believing it. That is how conscience dies. They preached humility but craved admiration, enforced purity laws but justified cruelty. And when truth exposed their performance, what happened? They plotted his death. They did not hate Jesus for wrongdoing, as they portrayed it. They hated him for clarity. Narcissists can forgive almost anything except being seen for who they are and dealt as such. Number three, Herod Antipas, the mocking ruler who wanted amusement, never the truth. Herod Antipas ruled with wealth, vanity, and fear, as you may know. When Jesus was brought before him, Herod was excited. He had heard stories about miracles and wanted to witness one in person. It was his demonic curiosity because it was fed by ego. He wanted entertainment, mockery, right? He asked questions, demanded a display of power, and waited for Jesus to perform for him. When nothing happened, his laughter replaced the interest. Herod and his soldiers mocked him, dressed him in an elegant robe, and sent him away. That is what narcissists do when they cannot control. They humiliate. When admiration fails, mockery becomes their next tool always. Herod did not see a person of God. He saw a man refusing to serve his vanity. The silence of Jesus enraged him more than words ever could. That's exactly what happens to narcissists. This is the mind already reprobate, disconnected from conscience, and addicted to spectacle, incapable of reverence. Herod treated sacredness like theater because his soul had turned numb. That is what happens when ego becomes the only voice a person hears. Number four, Pontius Pilate, the coward who chose image over integrity. Pilate was a political figure, cautious and clever. He was not openly violent like Herod or arrogant like the Pharisees, but his narcissism lived in moral cowardice. He questioned Jesus, found no guilt, and declared, I find no fault in this man. Yet, when the crowd demanded blood, he bent. Afraid of losing status, he surrendered an innocent life to preserve reputation. He washed his hands in front of everyone, symbolically claiming innocence while authorizing the execution. It was a perfect act of a cowardly narcissist, harming others while pretending neutrality. Pilate represents the seared conscience hiding behind diplomacy. He wanted to be perceived as fair without taking the cost of being just. That's how many narcissists operate. They maintain an image of balance while standing comfortably beside wrongdoing. This type is subtle but lethal. They betray not through aggression but through silence. Their refusal to stand for truth is in itself an alliance with evil. When conscience is ignored long enough, it becomes silent and then dies. Pilate's calm detachment was not peace, it was the biggest sign of his moral decay. Last one, Herod the Great, the paranoid king who tried to kill truth before it grew. Long before Jesus could speak, Herod the Great had already decided he should die. When the wise men arrived asking about the newborn king, Herod felt threatened. A child's birth disturbed a grown man's empire. That's exactly what happens when the demonic knows the light has arrived. That is the insecurity of the narcissist, fear of losing control even to innocence. He pretended devotion, didn't he? Told the Magi to find the child so he could worship him, and when they did not return, then he ordered the slaughter of every male infant in Bethlehem. The cruelty was unimaginable, yet perfectly aligned with the reprobate narcissistic mind. When ego rules completely, even the innocent become enemies. That's exactly what happens with narcissists. Herod's conscience was already beyond repair. Power had replaced humanity. He did not see families just threats. He did not see children but potential rivals. That is exactly what happens when fear of losing control becomes stronger than fear of God. Herod's massacre was more than politics. It was spiritual symbolism, evil trying to destroy purity before it matures. That same pattern appears today when narcissists attack goodness in its earliest form, mocking innocence and crushing potential. This is exactly what explains why the narcissist attacked light in you. It's the same narcissist archetype, the same spirit reborn with a different body. It's basically the pattern that connects all these people. Different people, but one identical spirit. Herod the Great tried to kill truth before it could speak, as I was saying. Satan tried to manipulate truth into obedience. The Pharisees tried to shame truth into silence. Herod Antipas mocked truth for entitlement, and Pilate washed his hands of truth to protect his image. Different approaches, same disease. Ego without empathy. The Bible calls it a reprobate mind and a seared conscience, and both describe what narcissism truly is: the loss of moral sensitivity. When pride hardens, guilt disappears. When conscience burns and empathy dies. These men were not just political or religious figures, they were spiritual warnings for us. Each shows a stage of degeneration that begins with pride and ends with total moral blindness. Pride invites deceit, destroys conscience, and without conscience, guess what? A person becomes capable of literally anything. That's why Jesus faced them without anger. He understood their sickness. Truth does not compete with delusion, it simply stands. And when darkness tries to destroy it, light exposes itself through endurance. What does it mean for you? See, when you have been mocked, gaslit, or devalued by a narcissist, you have touched the same kind of evil that surrounded Jesus. That's why it feels so deep, because it goes beyond psychology. As I always say, it's spiritual. You're not dealing with someone who merely misunderstands you, but with a conscience that has lost its ability to feel, and that's why we can call it evil. I want you to see it, because once you see it, you stop taking all of this personally. You understand the grand scheme of things. This is a reflection of your value. Can't cure a reprobate mind with kindness or awaken a seared conscience with logic. No. Your only power is to stay in truth, the same way Jesus did: silent when provoked, firm when tested, compassionate without submission. Those are the words that I had to share with you. Let me know in the comments, what do you believe? And I will talk to you in the next one. Until then, as always, let the healing begin and continue.